It's not working.
You just gotta
It's
push the
not
button.
working.
There's a button right there, right?
It's not
on the little thing.
Before we begin, let me establish my credentials because speculative authors are understandably suspicious of authority. My name is MJ Huntsgood and I am a mid-career horror author. That means I have an agent, which I have told everyone I know about. I have published some short fiction, which a lot of people I don't know have read. And I have a novel, which has not been published but has been sent out to a lot of people. So I am not here as a master. I am here as a cautionary tale with a camera. I am here to teach you how to write speculative fiction, particularly horror-adjacent speculative fiction, without losing your mind, your voice, or whatever joy capitalism hasn't already sandblasted off of your soul. If you're new to writing, or new to speculative writing in particular, my goal today is not to overwhelm you or convince you that you need to be brilliant to belong here. You don't. You just need curiosity, persistence, and tolerance for some really questionable first drafts. Let's begin. Speaking of capitalism, speculative fiction is not where you make money. It's where you make worlds. And cautionary tales, if you do it right. Speculative isn't a genre. It's an umbrella term for what if things were worse. Science fiction asks, what if technology advanced? Fantasy asks, what if magic were real? And horror asks, what if you never emotionally recovered from anything? Speculative asks all three and then adds, what if this said something really uncomfortable about society? It's also where you ask, what if? Let's talk a little about the history of speculative. The term speculative was coined in 1947 by Robert A. Heinlein, but it might have actually gone back as far as 1888. The concepts behind speculative are ancient. They go back as far as we can tell in history. It was originally called historical invention and mythopoeia. And these stories were not just Greek gods doing their business. These were speculative takes on the world through reinventing it. We can see these stories as far back as Euripides' Medea, which I know I'm butchering, and Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream. These are speculative lenses. But how do you write a speculative story? It's not a genre again, it's really a way of asking questions. Speculative fiction asks, what if the world worked a little differently? What if one rule changed? What if something impossible, forbidden, or monstrous were suddenly real? Under that umbrella, you'll find science fiction, fantasy, slipstream, utopia, weird fiction, magical realism, and a lot of work that doesn't fit neatly anywhere, which is sometimes where the most interesting stuff lies. If you're ever worried that your idea is too strange, it's probably a sign that you're doing it right. And these stories don't have to be genre. They can be literary. You can do whatever you want in speculative. Speculative doesn't discriminate. It usually likes to call out the discrimination in a way that makes the reader somewhat uncomfortable, which we'll get into in a minute. One misconception I see a lot is that speculative fiction is about escaping the real world. In practice, it's often the opposite. Speculative writing is about how we talk about fear safely, examine power and injustice sideways, explore grief, survival, desire, without turning it into a memoir. Horror, in particular, is rarely about the monster. It's about what the monster or the ghost or whatever reveals. And yes, sometimes it's about a haunted house that eats people. We can do both. And here's a quick but important note. You don't need permission to write speculative fiction. You don't need a degree, you don't need a high concept idea, and you don't need a perfect understanding of the genre. And most importantly, you don't need a tragic backstory that proves that you're worthy to write speculative fiction. You just need to start where you are. Some people are planners and some people are pantsers, but everyone needs to start with an idea. And sometimes coming up with the best idea can get you stuck. Overthinking a good idea is the best way to ruin a good speculative book. You start to see too many trees and not enough of your own path. This is my recipe. Start with the ordinary introduce the impossible, and then follow the human consequences. For example, take a typical town and then introduce a ghost that won't go away. Take a normal family and introduce a child that wasn't there before. Take a familiar world and introduce a rule that punishes something we do every single day. If you're new to writing speculative, I strongly recommend starting small. Not because novels aren't wonderful, they're my everything, but because short fiction teaches us how stories work with much less emotional damage. Think of short stories as a laboratory. You're allowed to blow things up. Short stories teach you how to start late, how to end decisively, how to identify the emotional core of a story, how to revise without rewriting your entire life. They also teach you how to develop taste, which is really kind of a core of becoming a writer. When you write short fiction, you begin to notice what ideas excite you, what genres feel like home, what techniques you overuse, and which risks are worth taking again. A good speculative short story usually starts with one sharp question, not a fully built world. For example, what if grief were contagious? What if the dead could text us, but only once? What if a town collectively forgot that one person ever existed? You don't need subplots. You don't need lore. You just need a question. For people new at writing short stories, I highly recommend one main character, one primary speculative element, and one emotional arc. Short fiction isn't about explaining a universe, it's about creating an experience. If your short story feels too big, ask yourself, what's the smallest moment where this idea hurts the most? Where does the speculative element really touch a human or alien life? Then write that scene. Here's the part nobody likes, except me. Revision. Revision is not punishment. It's not proof you failed. It's part of being a writer. Here's some practical revision questions. What is the story really about? Where does it start to drag? Where did I get a little nervous and maybe pull back? What's the one image or moment that mattered the most? Here's the thing. Most published short stories were revised multiple times. My friend who won a major award had been working on her short story for over 2 years. Anyone who tells you otherwise is either lucky or lying. Short stories also give you things to submit, help you learn about rejection resilience, introduce you to editors and other writers, teach you how the industry works. You don't have to publish short fiction to become a novelist, but it helps more than people like to admit. And eventually you might notice something interesting, that you come back to the same idea over and over again, the same kind of fear, the same unanswered question. And that's often where novels come from. So let's talk about novels. Novels are wonderful. Novels are ambitious. Novels are also where writers accidentally latch themselves to bad habits by trying to do everything all at once. You might be ready for a novel if a single idea won't let you go. You keep imagining what happens when the short story ends. You're curious about long-term consequences. You're willing to sit with uncertainty for a really long time. You do not need perfect discipline, a flawless outline, or a guarantee that it will be good. You just need stamina and curiosity. Start with a character, not with world building. This is especially important in speculative fiction. I know it doesn't sound like it should be. World building is fun, but it's also a fantastic procrastination tool. Instead, start by asking, who is the story about? What do they want? What are they afraid of? How does the speculative element make that worse? Your world should put pressure on your character, not distract from them. If you ever feel lost, return to what does this moment cost my protagonist? Biggest thing, do not over-explain everything. One of the hardest lessons for new speculative novelists is restraint. You don't need to explain the full history of the magic system, every rule of the apocalypse, the scientific justification of the weird thing. Readers are smart. They like participating. Clarity matters. Exhaustiveness does not. And drafting is allowed to be messy. Your first draft does not need to be elegant, market ready, or remotely impressive. Its job is just to exist. My first drafts are short, emotionally uneven, missing entire scenes I didn't want to write. Revision is where structure, theme, and beautiful prose happen. A simple way to think about novels is to think about them in acts. Beginning, disruption. Middle, escalation. End, consequence. That's it. You'll complicate later. Speculative novels thrive on consequence. Whatever impossible thing you introduce, take it seriously. Follow it all the way through. Anyway, I hope this was helpful. Have fun and enjoy your speculative world.